a small interview of your lifetime, starting with your birth date and your name. What is your full name, Esther?
Ester Maxine Warber, Warber.
And where were you born?
Warber. In Grand Haven Township, Michigan, near Grand Haven City.
And what is your birth date?
March the 21st, 1923.
That's quite a few years ago, isn't it, Esther?
80 years ago.
Isn't that something? Uh, as you were growing up as a young girl, do you remember any of the things that happened in grade school? Anything
Yeah.
that stands out good?
I started in preschool, but they said I was too small, too young to fight the snowdrifts and all. So I started when I was 6 years old in first grade. And I missed 2 years of grade school. They shot me ahead so that I'm 11 years old and out of school, and the superintendent says, you've got to do something, you have to keep her busy. I started high school at age 12.
At age 12.
Yeah.
And can you recall any of your friends or any of the things that you did besides study in high school?
It was a very small school, Rosie Mountain School in Grand Haven Township. And we only had 13 kids in the school.
In a high school?
In high school we had a total of 168 graduating.
Okay.
Yeah, that was pretty good. It was
Yes.
the biggest class that had gone through. In 1940 I graduated from high school.
As you graduated from high school, what were your plans? What did you do then?
Oh, I wanted to be a nurse, I thought.
You thought, well, that's good. You mentioned that you looked forward to going to the Willow Run Bomber Plant. Can you tell us about that?
I applied when I was 19 after having worked in Detroit in first of all in the Farm Crest Bakery and then Seal Test Creamery, and went to Willow Run when they first started recruiting. Henry Ford owned that place, a huge place, the largest that had ever been in the world for.
Yes, it was.
It was building big planes also, one a day coming off the line. I had to wait until I was 20 years, until I was 19 years old, and worked there a little over a year.
What did you do at the bomber plant there?
I was on machines in the machine shop with Henry Ford's old cronies who made his bicycle with him.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Did you ever meet Henry Ford?
He came there a lot because those were his friends in the machine shop.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell us about any of the Henry's friends that you remember things
They
with?
were as old as he was, and that was quite an age. He might have been about 80 years old then. He went around to various people on the machines and talked to them, very friendly and very knowledgeable. He put me in the apprentice program up on the loft as well. He didn't personally do that. The supervisor did. But I learned quite a bit about machines.
What kind of machines did you learn about at that time?
I was mostly on the drill press and the sanding machine, but I did a little bit of work just to be doing it on the lathe and the milling machine.
Well, that's very interesting. As you continued to work at the bomber plant, what did you then discover? Like maybe...
I would see the planes as they moved down the line with the riveters, 1 mile. And at the end of the line, every day a plane coming off the line, like assembly line, with a WASP, a W-A-S-P, a WASP from England who would take that plane and get acquainted with it before she went through Canada and over to England to deliver it to the American pilots who were loading it with bombs and going off to the Europe. And we learned all of that, of course, about what was happening to our planes.
That was before Pearl Harbor?
No,
That was-
it was built about 1 year after Pearl Harbor.
Okay.
It was just built in a hurry. Great, big, huge plant.
Esther, do you recall the day of Pearl Harbor? What you were doing?
Yes, I was at Herman Kiefer Hospital looking through to the 4th floor window to a little boy who had scarlet fever, and his family were the ones I lived with in Detroit. At Forest and Grand River.
Pretty good. After you worked at the bomber plant, you then enlisted in the Waves?
I came out purposely showing my little sister the place and told them I was quitting to go into the Waves. But they didn't take me for 3 months. I didn't realize that I had all that waiting to do from about the end of September until they finally took me by train, the first train I'd ever ridden, to get to Hunter College in New York City. Very exciting, it really was. So September I got my exam, my physical exam, and they got all of my history and had me all ready to go. But they were very busy at Hunter College. They only gave us 4 weeks of basic training.
Esther, do you remember what kind of a train that was?
It was a Canadian train. We always moved while I was in the United States on Canadian trains.
Were they?
They must have.
Were these diesel engines or steam engines?
Diesel, yeah. They weren't steam.
Okay. Anything special happen on the train the way to New York?
Oh, my friends all gave me a lot of joking about how I spent my time. They played cards and I read the dictionary. I had left my 2 classes in Ann Arbor and I had books that I had been studying. English and history.
You mentioned that you saw a poster which really triggered your thoughts to
A
join the
beautiful
Waves.
poster. And that was a glamorous poster. And it was with the uniform that I then was able to wear when I got to Hunter College. It was a Mainbacher or a handmaker uniform. He was one of the well-known fashion designers. We had a really good-looking uniform.
As you went through basic at Hunter College, can you tell us any of your recollections there?
Okay, I got off that train in New York Central Station with my Pullman case and my high heels, and I walked 200 blocks to the reservoir out by Jerome Avenue and in that area. And we went up 6 story. I was assigned to a room with about 6 girls on the 6th floor. We'd get there and they'd have us come down to assemble on the street, a parade rest, and call off our names. And then most of the time we had to hunt, and I had to go off to some of the classrooms and get measured for uniforms and get some Coast Guard last shoes, and we got our work outfits with a back that was a drop seat. We got rid of that as soon as we could petition the people who could change our uniform, and were able to wear the men's dungarees because we couldn't stand that uniform. It went out of style.
Well, good. Did you do physical exercises and things in basic training like the men did?
A lot of it was just running around the reservoir and running up those 6 flights of stairs. It was all walk up. They locked up the elevators. Everybody walked everywhere. We had classroom discussions and just anything that would give us exercise. We always had to walk about a mile to get over to the dining room 3 times a day.
Wow.
A lot of walking.
What did your basic training consist of?
Getting fitted for uniforms and a medical
mean,
exam. I had that already in Detroit, but they did it all over again. And we trained as to what Navy was all about, what the men were doing, what the war needed, what kind of effort we might have to put forth. It was much quicker than any other group had gone through. They always took maybe 3 months, and we had 4 weeks. And we got on the train again, a Canadian train, and went out of New York Central Station.
Where did you go?
We had to make a choice of what we wanted. I said I would like storekeeper, and I got aviation machinist mate school.
As you went to aviation machinist mate school, where was that at?
At Norman, Oklahoma, in the heart of that big state of Oklahoma. A lot of red dust. When we got there, there had been a tornado the night before. By the way, it took us 5 days of traveling by day and being on sidings at night. They didn't have us travel. They had to take supplies and freight trains at night. So we were a passenger train, old cattle cars, by the way. And when we got there, the tornado had really done a job on all of the garbage cans, and that's what we did the first few days, is clean up garbage all over the yards and the grounds.
That was at Norman, Oklahoma?
Yes.
And what location is that in relation to Tulsa?
Well, it's further from Tulsa, where the storekeeper school was, by the way, for the Waves.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 18 miles out of Oklahoma City, where
Okay.
they had all kinds of oil derricks everywhere in Oklahoma.
Could you describe a little bit what the terrain looked like? Could you smell the oil?
In Oklahoma City, I think so. Where we were, it was nice, clear atmosphere, very spacious grounds, lots of hangars with old planes that had already had their usefulness in the war effort or prior to the war. It was 4 miles from North Base, where the boys were training for pilot training. I had a nephew my age at the North Base, and he became a fighter pilot going off the aircraft carriers. So, I saw him a few times. We had to go to North Base and fix tears in the Yellow Peril training planes. We also had a lot of classroom training, sitting and learning all about planes. We all went to auditoriums and learned to identify planes. They zoom them across the screen like in a movie theater, and you had to tell on paper what plane that was. And I wasn't all that accurate in finding the right label for the planes. I learned later on what they were because I actually worked on them in Alameda. But while I was in training for 6 months, I had the measles, and they put me in a dark room, wouldn't let me do anything for 2 weeks. and I was 2 weeks behind with my class. So I took over the platoon leader job for 8 other people who had fallen behind in their classes. We marched to class. We had classes until noontime, and then stood in a big mess line to get fed, go right back to the classes. In our last 2 months of the 6th, we were out taking planes apart and putting them back together again, learning all about how an engine works, because it had to work when we put it back to it. With a proper propeller, and it couldn't fly, but it had to have a live engine after we had torn it apart.
So you became quite proficient at repairing airplane engines.
Yeah.
What was the food like in the mess hall as you stood in line to wait?
Beans every morning. A great big tray of beans. Sometimes it didn't get very much use. It was there after we finished our breakfast.
How was what were your uniforms at that time? Did you wear dress uniforms to work in, or?
Somewhere along early on, we got rid of those drop seat uniforms that didn't do anything glamorous, and we got the men's dungarees in their store, in their storekeeper shop. And we had captain's parade inspection in the barracks on Saturday morning. Every Saturday, competition with the other barracks. There were, I had understood there were men there, plus the waves, 20,000 people. And as soon as we left, they had 20,000 more in training. Wow. It was still kind of early on for training. The captain's parade was very dusty and red dust, and we had to send them out to Oklahoma City to be cleaned every week. That was at our own expense. And we also had to buy any extra uniforms. They gave us 2 uniforms, basically. Beautiful uniforms, as I have said.
As you went through Norman, Oklahoma, and the training and so on the airplanes there, tell me a little bit about what kind of planes you worked on and the engines that you rebuilt.
Okay. I graduated 2 weeks later than any of my friends, my buddies that I trained with, and I was aviation machinist, second class, and went by train home for 10 days, and then straight away through St. Louis and out to Alameda, California, to an assembly and repair plant where I went in the machine shop.
Okay, and
carried on in the machine shop.
What kind of train did you take to Alameda, California?
I think it might have been the Wolverine or the New York Central. It was not the cattle cars, but we did have plenty of cattle cars that were shipped around all over the United States. We often got placed in those.
You really had, what did you do in there? Did they have chairs or anything? Or did
Oh
you
yeah,
just,
they were all fitted out with a dining car.
Okay.
And not an easy seat, but
at least something to sit on.
Sure. They faced each other in the same, like most of our passenger cars that had been around. I had never been riding trains. I had never seen trains inside until I went into Hunter College in New York City.
As you, do you recall anything special about your trip from Oklahoma to California, did you,
I stayed overnight in St. Louis after my 10 days at home, and lots of relatives to visit. I got into Alameda, California in probably about 4 or 5 days, and 2 huge long tunnels that kind of disturbed me. One was about a mile long, they told me. You just stayed forever inside the tunnel, dark. The train was all darkened,
mhm.
but there wasn't anything too different about,
Wasn't anything really different about the trip there?
nothing.
Did you have to stop and wait for other trains to go by
Oh,
much?
yes, yeah, not a whole lot. They had things planned a lot better than that the Amtrak does now,
There
when
you go.
computers are planning it all.
Right.
It was human beings who seemed to do a very good job of getting the trains where they belonged on schedule, and and on the side tracks, and letting one pass the other one.
These planes that you worked on and the engines that you worked on were all Navy planes?
Yes, they were.
What kind of planes were
Yeah.
they?
They were all of the basic fighter planes, Pratt and Whitney engines, and all of the planes that I worked on were the small fighter planes that were going out on aircraft carriers. I just saw parts in the machine shop, but then I took a course to learn all of the insides of the flying boats. I got my certificate in that, and I think I can't really recall how long the course was. It was about 3 months. I already knew engines from out in Norman, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the Rolls-Royce engines from Britain.
Yeah.
And pontoons, of course. We learned everything about the plane, the entire plane, the flight engineering deck, and we didn't just go through the engine.
So
We sat in
yeah.
class learning about the engine.
What was this, a Navy plant, a Navy rebuilding area that you went to in California?
It was a Navy, it was right outside our base, part of the federal compound, I think, with all the Eskimo huts. I went into an Eskimo hut and had 2 very smart young men who taught us. It was a small class. I think there were about 4, or maybe there were 6 of us in the class. And some time aboard the flying boats.
As you did this rebuilding work on the engines, were they? Did you get to see the planes themselves? Were the engines in the plane? You took them out?
Yes, they'd fly the used planes that have been in the Pacific to our runways, and there were people, the Navy men on the line that I don't think any of our girls were out there on the airport area, but they would take the engine strip down, and we got then they use our new parts. Our machine shop was making new parts for the most part. We did some liners on air ventilators and things that could be retrieved and reused. That's what I did on the sanding machines.
And how long were you there in California?
I had about 1.5 years on the Alameda base, and I also took the course to become aviation machinist mate, first class. And so they said I had to wait until all the men had gotten, those who had taken the course and wanted to move up. When they moved up, then I'd have a chance. They told me that right away. And so I waited, and before I got out, they gave me the first class because I had passed the exam when I was 21.
You were 21 at
Hardly.
that time?
I guess I was 21,
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Almost, anyway.
I think, yeah.
Uh, Were you there at this base when the war ended?
I was in Hawaii, 6 months in Hawaii.
How did you get from the repair base to Hawaii?
I asked to go to Panama, and they sent me to Hawaii. And it was the first group that had moved out. They had a group that moved to Alaska, one to Bermuda, one to Panama, and one to Hawaii. And we went with what had been a private cruise ship, lure line, and it took us 5 days with rendezvousing every morning and traveling with merchant marines, a whole lot of supply ships on their way to far off places in the Pacific. And we were stopping at Hawaii. Oh, the ship had already been loaded with women and children to go back to Hawaii. When we got there, they still had all of the fence around on the beaches. They had everything pretty well patrolled and guarded, and they had our own submarines out in the waters all around the islands. But there had been no attacks for enough time so that they thought it was safe to bring the civilian women and children back.
And what did you do then in Hawaii?
They put me right on the line, and I went out, an 18-year-old taught me how to run a supply 1.5-ton truck, or a big truck that had, it was a British engine, but I steered it in the same fashion we always used for our American cars. But you had to have four-way stops and use a lot of care and going around to do anything like supplying the ships, loading them up, tarmac work. But I also, because I was one of the petty officers, I worked in the administrative office at the airport. And we pushed the chiefs out of their barracks and took over as far as our living quarters. It was, I'm sure, distressing to all of those guys who had to move into barracks while the girls took over.
What was your
single
rank
rooms.
then?
We all had single rooms.
Oh, nice. What was your rank then?
I was aviation machinist mate, second class. And so I had a little scooter to run around all over the place, including the airport area. I met people in all of the missile stations and the missile dump. Not missiles, but whatever, they had all of the
Ammunition dump.
Yeah, the ammunition dump, there you go. They gave me all of the war bonds that the civilians and the military boys had taken out of their pay, which was very slim in those days, but they could always make $18.75 on their war bonds. And we still went all over the island getting acquainted with all the fascinating things on the little bit of money that we had left when we took the bonds. We never missed on war bonds. I always had the same people to give another one to every month.
So you were working in the office then and doing more paperwork?
I ran around all over.
Yeah.
I didn't sit in the office and do any typing or anything.
So you, while you were in Hawaii, did you do any rebuilding of engines and that sort of thing, or was that kind of behind you?
No, it was supplying the planes. I helped with putting the. I took another course.
Yes.
I took a course on the flight engineering, which I was so proud because there were only two of us in the waves that had ever done that at that time. The aviation machinist made, I was so proud that I made several copies of my certificate and showed everybody.
Yes, she gave us one.
That was a highlight of my time in the service. And that was, again, two young military men, sailors, who taught the course 8 weeks. And then I did some practice or training trips down to Moto's Inn on the Parker Ranch on the Big Island for training trips.
Did you get any chance at all to have any time, recreation time or anything like that?
Loads of it. USO dances on the baby aircraft carriers that were parked out near Kaneohe Bay. I wasn't in Pearl Harbor, or I was immediately placed over across the Poly Pass to Kaneohe Bay, and a big air base.
Did you happen to have any opportunity to go to the USO dances and things where the big name
Always.
bands were there?
We could go every Saturday night,
All right.
Friday night.
Did you-
Sometimes we
yeah.
wanted to go to the Queens YMCA in Honolulu, and to Sears Roebuck, and to see all of the spouting Pacific coming up through volcanic tubes. They had a lot of water spouts, and they were fascinating to see. They had lookouts at these places. It took only a Sunday afternoon to go all the way around Oahu, the major island that Honolulu is located. And they had big grocery stores. They called them Piggly Wigglies.
Yes.
Oh, yes, yes, I remember.
They have them all up and down California and Seattle and around now.
Tell us, did you happen to see any of the movie star entertainers and people like that as you were there and went to the USO clubs?
In Alameda, I saw a lot of them.
And
It wasn't too far away from Los Angeles and Hollywood, and ex-President Ronald Reagan's, he was the lieutenant colonel and in charge of the USO entertainment, and shipped a lot of people out to Hawaii and further. And sometimes we were able to, we could see them on the island. Most of the time they just had a little rest stop and went off to Australia or to the Philippines or Iwo Jima or whatever, wherever they were going. Most of them went all the way out to the dangerous zones in the USO, but we saw a lot of people coming through who were getting rest and recreation, the boys themselves. They'd come to the famous hotels on the island, and at Diamond Head, and at the Breakers is where we had USO dances when we didn't have them aboard ship. They were always asking us to come out aboard ship, because the aircraft carriers only came in for refueling, not really so much resupplying. They got that on the mainland. But they had to stop at Hawaii. And so we had USO dances all the time. Many, many of them. And the women officers, the wave women officers, had barracks that were a little bit more elegant than our chief's quarters. And I did guard duty or nighttime duty up there, introducing the date when the out in the lobby, telling the person that their date was ready for them to go out for a restaurant. We had a lot of good meals, anywhere on the island, many, many places on the island.
So the meals were a little better than the beans at basic training?
Yes, the beans kind of are still used in Navy bases, I understand, and they always have bean soup in the Senate in Washington D.C. And it's traditional for them to have beans for breakfast and beans for supper.
Do you remember where you were at VJ Day?
I'm sorry.
The end of the Japanese war?
Excuse me. I was on Kaneohe Bay, and they had 4 days of blowing up ammunition dumps and having an exciting and ecstatic kind of a time. They just really had no work getting done. And the people were signed up, I think, immediately for how many points they had and whether they could leave to go back home to the mainland, get out of the military.
Mm-hmm.
The men were high priority, and the waves were support people and stayed a little bit slower. But it wasn't long, and they had them loaded aboard planes and ships and hospital ships. I went on a hospital ship eventually back to Los Angeles. The chief of my unit in the machine area, I had not been working for him. A couple of my friends had. But he married a Hawaiian girl and took her on a honeymoon for a month to the mainland. And so I got my aviation machinist mate, first class. I just stepped into the job. And there were very few people to take care of anymore. They were all gone, out of the service already in that month. I took over the chief's machine shop, and there was nothing doing on the tarmac. So in the morning, I would have to do all my chores and guard duty. We did have to guard the fence. We had guards, the boys on one side of the fence, the girls inside our compound. Lots of good talk and lots of good coffee. But we had to have guard duty. We also guarded inside our barracks as well as the fence line. After I got all of my duties done and cleaning up barracks, and even though I was supposed to be in charge of practically no personnel, really, then I could go out to Nimitz Beach and play volleyball and eat my meal out there. Usually it was waffles with strawberries or waffles with tuna fish or waffles with not beans, something else. Anything went with the waffles. That was a very nice month. The boys were supposed to be in charge of taking care of the beach and cleaning it up daily, and they let me clean it up. I was never assigned to it. I loved to go out there and run their tractor, and they had sifted the sand through and cleaned up a lot of junk off the beach. Beautiful beaches out in Hawaii.
As you came back to the States, you say you came on a hospital ship?
It was the Tranquility. It had made many voyages back from the Pacific and all of the places where they were in New Guinea and everywhere. They had, I think, always stopped at Hawaii. There weren't very many people when I came back, because I had been delayed a little bit. And it took us about 5 days, big, beautiful, fast ship. The Tranquility had been made for the Canadian Oil Company. Canada transferred it to the United States, and it was fitted as a hospital ship. It was kind of a nice ride.
Weather was good?
The weather was very good, and I listened to radio music. By the way, in Hawaii, we had Bob Crosby. He finally got sent off to the Philippines, but Bob Crosby, the Bing's brother,
Mhm.
had a wonderful band, and he had been in Oklahoma. And when I got out to Hawaii, there he was for all of the time that I was in Hawaii. And near the end, he had to go. I don't know where he got located. Further on in the Pacific. But we had all kinds of good music. Those wonderful songs of World War II were played on the ship radio, and I laid in the sun on the and on the deck. Didn't do much of anything for 5 days. I got into the Presidio, and I think I said Los Angeles. I went into the Presidio of San Francisco. There were two of them. I had left to go to Hawaii out of San Francisco. And they kind of debriefed us for a couple of days. We then took one of the cattle car trains to go to Great Lakes, Illinois, where I was discharged.
So you ended up being discharged in Great Lakes, Illinois.
February 8th, 1946.
All right. After you were discharged, what did you do?
I was taken by either the Wolverine or the New England, not New England, New York train, New York 20th Century Limited train from Great Lakes the very same day, February 8th, to Ann Arbor, and I registered that day for my to finish my freshman first semester in the Great Lakes. They were on quarters then, they weren't on semesters, but it didn't take them long to change from quarters to semesters, and I finished up my 156 credit hours and 3.5 years, and I went summers on the GI Bill, and they paid all of our tuition by IBM card, and we delivered them to the administrative office. They put us pretty much on our own. My roommate had been an ex-wave too. That first year, she went steady real quick after she hit campus, and she and the guy that she was later to marry took off on what they called a snowball expedition to Washington, D.C., to the Congress to get us more money because we were making $65 a month to live on, and they pushed it up to $85 a month.
Wow.
A little bit less than what they get nowadays.
A little bit less, yes.
Yeah, and I might say that when I went into the military in the waves, I was getting the very same pay that the men were, $96 a month. And from the very beginning, I bought war bonds.
There you go.
I thought they were useful, and
They were,
they
weren't
accumulated very well for me.
So
They don't
what
like
did you
to
major in?
buy the war bonds now so easily. I could sell war bonds. The men from the Pacific coming off the ship in Hawaii and in Alameda And in the Civic Auditorium in San Francisco, they had, there was no problem. Civilians as well as the military, they all bought war bonds. I was proud of my effort on that. I also, I had that engine in a safety effort where I have to use a fire extinguisher on a Pratt and Whitney reconstructed engine. And the we'd it was a dangerous kind of thing. I was scared to death while I was in that pit holding that fire extinguisher. We never had a fire. I never had a fire while I was in, but many of us had to take that duty. It was almost constant. I think there were mostly the firefighters, and they were specially trained to be out on the tarmac when they were firing up a plane to take off. But that pit duty was
the pits, huh?
isolated, yeah, and dangerous. And I got through that.
As you went back to college, you said for 3.5 years?
3.5 years. Yes.
What did you do after that?
I tried to get a job in one of the places in the North Chicago TB hospital because I had lab work training.
Mm-hmm.
I was in basic sciences, but I had taken a little of this and that, and it didn't look that much as if I was a lab tech. So I went on. I was in Grosse Ile that summer, and they had put me on the unemployment rolls and tried to find a job in Muskegon for me. And my resumes had come out from the head office in Ann Arbor, and so I took the summer duty on the line over at Grosse Ile, and I went back to. I took an exam for nursing school and went into nursing school with the rest of my GI Bill.
Mm-hmm.
In Ann Arbor.
And so you
University of
became a
Michigan.
nurse?
I took a year and a half of it.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite a year and a half. I had a year and a summer. And decided I didn't want to be a nurse. So I got back and worked in an OBGYN office for 3 years. 4 years in Blue Cross Blue Shield at 600 Lafayette in Detroit. And I was a supervisor in the subscriber interviewing, and all my people that I was supervising would tell me they were going back to graduate school. So I went back to graduate school in Wayne State University and became a psychologist. And while I was training at Wayne State, I worked in a cardiac specialist's office. He was affiliated with Henry Ford Hospital. Very good experiences. And
So
it
back
was all
to Henry
helpful.
Ford. Was Henry Ford still alive then?
No, he had, I think he died right at the end of the war. He was a good age when he died. I don't remember how old, but like up 90 years old or something.
So,
And he was a very personable old guy.
what did you do at the Henry Ford Hospital then?
Well, I didn't work in Henry Ford Hospital. I worked in the Fisher Building in Detroit,
okay.
in the cardiac specialist office. But he was affiliated with Women's Hospital and taught the interns the cardiac specialty. I did his notes all over. He kept me there.